O.J. Simpson.
Fact or fiction?
Is it the shoes?
No, Mom.
It's the shoes then, right?
Nah.
Money's gotta be the shoes. Shoes. You sure it's not the shoes?
I'm sure, Mom.
What about the shoes?
No, Mom.
Money's gotta be the shoes.
Prosecutors returned to try and see if the shoes fit O.J. Simpson, this time with a salesman from Bloomingdale's. Samuel Poser said he sold size 12 shoes to Simpson.
During the time period that you had sold shoes to Mr. Simpson, was Bloomingdale's one of the 40 stores that sold Bruno Magli Lorenzo shoes?
Yes, we did.
And maybe you could take the shoes out of there and tell us if one of those is Lorenzo.
This is Lorenzo, the boot.
He is indicating what has previously been referred to as the size 12 semi or demi boot.
But Poser couldn't remember selling these.
Do you remember whether or not you sold those shoes to the defendant?
No, I did not.
Prosecutors theorized the murderer wore size 12 boots similar to this expensive Italian brand.
What kind of records does Bloomingdale's keep when customers who charge on credit cards purchase goods?
We have a journal on the register that shows who sold what to whom, to what credit card, okay, as well as the receipt, a copy of the receipt that the customer signs.
Now, did you, in cooperation with the detectives, search the records of Bloomingdale's looking for any evidence of a sale such as you've been asked about?
Personally, I did no searching.
Have you seen any records that were retrieved as
Yes.
a result of that?
Yes.
Have you examined them?
Yes.
And have you found various purchases of shoes?
Yes. Of that.
Have you ever been questioned about a sales slip that showed the code for this particular shoe, or seen one?
No. Not that I know of.
Under cross-examination, F. Lee Bailey pointed out that even though Simpson may have purchased boots, they probably weren't the right type for Buffalo, and he told police that.
On one occasion, were you questioned about the sale of the boots to Mr. Simpson in connection with his duties in Buffalo?
I guess when I was first asked, I mentioned that was the one thing that I remembered specifically.
Right, that he had some job in Buffalo and he was purchasing some boots because he'd be working outdoors, right?
Correct.
Did you understand that the climatic conditions were expected to be adverse when he bought them?
Yes, I did.
All right. Were you shown a Lorenzo Bruno Magli black in cover by Detective Pietrantonio of the LAPD?
Yes, I was.
And did he ask you whether or not that was similar in type to what you had sold Mr. Simpson?
Did he ask me that?
Yes.
Yes, he did.
Did he ask you whether or not the boot that you had told him about was similar to the shoe he was showing you?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And did you tell him, no, it was not?
I told him that I did not recall selling the Lorenzo boot to Mr. Simpson. I also said that for the use in Buffalo, I probably would not have sold Mr. Simpson the Lorenzo boot for the climatic conditions that were there.
Exactly. It would not do well in slush, snow, and mud, would it?
Correct.
It's the shoes then, right?
Nah.
The Liner Leone and the Lorenzo.
FBI agent William Bodziak went halfway around the world to find these expensive Italian shoes he said are similar to the ones that could have been worn by O.J. Simpson to commit the murders.
Initially, I was asked to determine what type of shoe, what brand or manufacturer type of shoe made the impressions that were located in blood on the Bundy sidewalk.
And did you consult any reference collections of the sort that you mentioned previously in order to do that?
Yes, I did. I initially consulted the FBI's reference collection, which involves thousands of impressions on computer and in photographs and catalogs, but I was unable to find that particular design. In looking at the detail in the shoe impressions in the 30 photographs which I was submitted, which were the impressions from the Bundy location, I observed that there were certain features about that shoe that strongly suggested that it was a high-end, that is a very expensive Italian brand shoe. So I looked through our written reference material and I identified approximately 75 to 80 manufacturers and importers of high-end Italian shoes and some South American shoes or Brazilian shoes. And I prepared a sketch and one of the photographs, a composite photograph, a composite sketch and 3 photographs of heel impressions from the Bundy scene, along with a letter, and contacted those manufacturers and importers to see if they recognized or knew the origin of that particular design. Sent an inquiry to 8 international laboratories which I knew had computerized reference collections, such as the FBI, and I sent them pictures of the sole of the shoe, as well as the pictures from the crime scene, a couple pictures from the crime scene at Bundy, and asked them the same question: if could they identify the brand name or manufacturer of this shoe. 7 of them responded and said they did not have this shoe in their collection. The 8th one, the National Police Agency in Tokyo, Japan, responded and advised that they had a shoe that they had obtained from a merchant of this design that was distributed in Europe and was made in Italy. Yes, on August 17th, I received a reply from a Mr. Peter Gruderich of the Bruno Magli UMA shoe store in New Jersey. He sent me 2 shoes that were left over from a Bruno Magli distribution of his in 1991 and 1992. These were both right shoes. One was a size 9.5 and one was a size 12. And I believe from looking at them, they were probably samples that were just left over. Also sending...
Boziak examined the bloody footprints found on the walkway outside Nicole Brown Simpson's condo. They matched the soles on the exclusive Bruno Magli shoes, he said, and the size and Simpson's tennis shoes are a perfect fit.
The Line or Leon and the Lorenzo, which were submitted to me by Mr. Peter Gruderich. The bottom of the shoe has design elements which are repeated across the entire sole area as well as the heel. And these design elements, which repeat after one another across the width and length of the shoe, are identical in size in both the heel and the sole. And they are surrounded by a perimeter, a little raised line. And then there's an outer perimeter which does not actually touch the surface of the ground, but which is a little bit raised, but can touch it if there's enough weight or other factors. The same is true of the heel, and the leading edge of the heel is curved and has the notch cut off of the medial side, the inner side. This is a reverse photograph, so this is actually the enlargement of the left shoe. And this would be the outside of the body, and this would be the inside to the right as you look at it. And in the center arch area, there is the name Bruno Magli. That's B-R-U-N-O-M-A-G-L-I, as well as the capital M for Bruno Magli, their logo in the middle of that. And at the very bottom, in the shadow here, which is probably hard to see, is the words Made in Italy, and up in the top corner here is the word Silga, S-I-L-G-A, which, to answer your question, this is the manufacturer in Italy of this outsole. Also, there is a oval area, and removed, that's normally where the name goes, Bruno Magli, but the slug, which is removable, is sitting next to that mold, and this was the purpose of taking this picture, was to show that this can be removed. The factory has another set of slugs which have the name Lord, L-O-R-D, on them, and that was the name on the shoe that the National Police Agency in Japan had identified as part of their reference collection from Europe.
Boziak examined the bloody footprints found on the walkway outside Nicole Brown Simpson's condo. They matched the soles on the exclusive Bruno Magli shoes, he said, and the size and Simpson's tennis shoes are a perfect fit. Boziak then matched up the bloody shoe print from the murder scene to samples of the expensive Bruno Magli shoes, trying to show the jury they match.
The chart entitled Shoe Print Comparison on the left side has one of the photographs which I examined, which is a bloody shoe print from the Bundy location. At the crime scene, it was marked Shoe Print E. The Los Angeles Police Department called it Shoe Print E, and the FBI, in my report, I referred to it as Q107. It is an impression of both the sole and heel. On the right side is another shoe print which I marked FBI Q68, and which was down in the lower walkway area at the very entrance inside the gate. And that is of a heel impression, and if whatever impression would have been up here would have been, if that impression had been laid down up here, it would have been interfered with by the other blood in that area. So you can only really see the heel impression on FBI Q68. In the middle is an approximate 2-time enlargement of one of the test impressions I made of the left shoe using the European sole size 46. And attached to shoe print E and the shoe print on the right and the left of the chart are transparencies that are made from the same test impression that's in the center. And this allows, in the comparison and demonstration process, of superimposing the features that are left in test impressions of the size 46 and other size soles over top of the impressions that are examined at the crime scene. And by putting these over these impressions, the precise configuration of the design elements, as I had mentioned before, and how they meet the borders where they are visible in this print, as well as the design element and fragments of the border, which were up in this area and made from respective areas of the shoe, correspond. And also FBI Q68, the heel impression, the overlay demonstrates that as well. You can place this overlay back and forth and see the corresponding pattern agrees. Using this method, I was able to take the size 42 through 47 shoes of both left and right, and I was able to make test impressions through direct physical contact in a transparency form. I was able to place these over the crime scene impressions and determine which size of the European soles made that impression and eliminate the others. And in doing so, with regard to these two, I determined the left size 46 sole positively made the impressions, and the 42 through 45 and 47 soles could positively be eliminated.
And with respect to the print on the right that says shoe print, FBI Q68, even though only a heel of that is visible, you were able to determine that was a 46 European sole?
Yes.
How?
Because the heels, like the rest of the shoe, are distinctly different. And so no other heel in the other sizes could have made that impression.
Were you able to determine whether these shoe prints were made with a shoe that was manufactured on that precise mold that you saw at the Silga factory, the 46 mold?
Yes, it had to have been made in that mold. There would be no other mold like it. So it was made, the shoe that made the impressions that I've addressed here, Q107 and Q68, were positively shoes that came from the Silga mold size 46.
Mr. Bodziak, directing your attention to the chart that we've just put up of what appears to be the Bundy location.
The purple shoe prints, such as is indicated here in B, represent the right foot impression, and the pink or red, whichever you choose to call it, as represented by D as an example, are the left footprints. And the medium colored blue, sort of without a footprint shape to them, those represent ones which were too indistinct. In other words, the impression had worn down to the point where they were too indistinct to attribute to either that design of shoe or to a particular left or right.
LAPD, letter A. Can you tell us what you did with respect to that comparison and show that for the jury?
Yes, again, using the original natural size photographs and the original overlays, test impressions of the shoe as is depicted in this demonstrative display, I found the characteristics in this impression corresponded only with the sole of the left size 46 shoe. And this is marked A, and the orientation of that is west, slightly angled toward the south, but in a somewhat westerly direction on the step, as denoted here by A.
So that's the second step?
Yes.
Okay, maybe you could just walk down here.
But they so far have no proof Simpson owned the shoes.
This is a montage of Special Agent Bodziak's presentation of each partial shoe print found at the Bundy crime scene. For each shoe print he presented, you will see 3 still images from the presentation. The first image is Special Agent Bodziak showing the actual crime scene photograph to the jury. The next image shows the actual crime scene photographed, but it's covered by an overlay of a complete Bruno Magli Lorenzo shoe print. The final image in the sequence is Bodziak holding the crime scene photograph next to the location on the map that the shoe print was found. This sequence will repeat for every shoe print photograph that Special Agent Bodziak presented to the jury. You should notice that you were seeing the full shoe print overlay far more often than the actual crime scene photograph. This is no mistake. Our analysis of Bodziak's presentation found that the jurors were shown the full shoe print overlay almost 3 times as often as they were shown the actual crime scene photograph. Why? Bodziak is using a very basic propaganda or psychological manipulation technique that is used to impact one's memory. Showing the overlay of the complete Bruno Magli shoe print 3 times longer than the actual shoe print photograph can impact one's memory. Ideally, instead of remembering the partial unidentifiable drivel, you will remember the shoe prints as being those pristine, complete shoe print overlays. This sequence presents every crime scene photograph of a partial shoe print. As you view these images, you will notice that there is not one photograph of a complete shoe print. The quality of the partial shoe prints found at the Bundy crime scene is subpar to say the least. Keep in mind that Bruno Magli sold the Lorenzo and Lion models with the Silga U2887 soles in 1991 and early 1992. Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were killed on June 12, 1994. Is it likely that someone of Mr. Simpson's status would wear shoes that were between 2.5 and 3.5 years old? In viewing these photos, what stands out the most to me is the absence of normal wear and tear to the soles of the shoes that made these shoe prints. In the best photos of the shoe prints, the soles of both shoes appear to be pristine. Absolutely no changes to the design elements, absolutely no tread loss, no wear patterns. O.J. Simpson is bow-legged, which means that all of his shoes likely have noticeable lateral sole wear. But as you see in each of these photographs of partial shoe prints, the shoes' soles appear to be pristine. Remember that on June 12, 1994, any pair of Bruno Magli shoes with rubber soles in the Lorenzo model would be between 2.5 and 3.5 years old.
Money's gotta be the shoes. Shoes. You sure it's not the shoes?
I'm sure, Mark.
In September 1999, CRC Press published the second edition of FBI Special Agent William Bodziak's book, Footwear Impression Evidence: Detection, Recovery, and Examination. In the second edition, Special Agent Bodziak included a new chapter about his role in the O.J. Simpson trials. Special Agent Bodziak writes that he received 30 crime scene shoe print photographs from LAPD. Out of the 30 photographs depicting partial shoe prints, Bodziak only included 2 in his book, found on pages 432 and 433. One would assume that the 2 he included were the best or most complete crime scene shoe print photographs. On page 432, Bosdiak recounts his initial examination of these shoe print photos. He shares that he quickly realized that the photographs depicted casual but expensive shoes. On page 433, he explains that he was able to identify characteristics evident in the shoe prints that were commonly found on expensive Italian shoes. Bosdiak's initial analysis of the photographs allowed him to establish criteria to use in his search of the FBI footwear database. Bosdiak was unable to match the shoe prints depicted in the crime scene photographs to anything in the FBI footwear database. Next, Bosdiak identified approximately 80 companies who either made, sold, or imported high-end Italian shoes. He then contacted all 80 companies by faxing each company a letter, 2 photographs of partial shoe prints, and a composite sketch of the shoe sole that he was attempting to identify. With this knowledge, I wonder if Special Agent Bosdiak's assumptions that the photographs depicted expensive Italian shoes caused him to unnecessarily limit his search parameters, and by doing so, exclude countless possibilities. For example, if one were to only focus on Italian and Brazilian shoe manufacturers, any shoe manufacturer in America that sells so-called knockoffs or copies of expensive Italian shoes at a cheaper price point would be needlessly excluded from the identification process. The absence of a single crime scene photograph depicting a complete shoe print, and the fact that the waffle tread pattern is not uncommon in soles, raises questions about the identification. Next, we turn to page 443. I want to call your attention to figure 15.8, which is currently on the screen. Special Agent Bosdiak's caption of figure 15.8 causes one to call into question his analysis of the Bundy crime scene. The caption of figure 15.8 reads, "The Bundy walkway was solid concrete, but made to look as if it were constructed of individual tiles. The arrow at the top points to the area where 3 Bruno Magli footwear impressions face across the walkway in the same direction as the arrow. Note the arrow is pointing to the left towards the wall of the condo." The caption continues, "The small tree and shrubs to the right would have provided a place to hide and might explain why the prints are facing in that direction." Special Agent Bosdiak is describing that 3 bloody partial shoe prints were found in a pattern that indicates that someone emerged from what he refers to as a hiding place and walked forward or towards the wall of the Bundy condo. However, it's important to note that there are no bloody shoe prints which document someone walking into the area which he describes as a hiding place on the right side of the photograph. In order for the killer or killers' bloody shoe prints to emerge from the hiding place and deposit the bloody shoe prints walking towards the wall of the Bundy condo, it is required that his shoes are already covered in blood. However, there are no partial shoe prints which document anyone walking into the hiding place. Additionally, there's no bloody shoe prints which indicate that the killer or killers were ever standing in the so-called hiding place. Since the publication of the second edition of Bosdiak's book in 1999, there is one passage that people have cleverly cherry-picked and engaged in distortion by omission in order to convince the public that the U2887 Silga soles were very common and were used in shoes made by over 20 companies. It is important to understand the actual facts and the context which is omitted by those who propagate misinformation. On page 435, Bosdiak identifies Mr. Libero Lumi as the owner of Bruno Magli. On page 439, Bosdiak writes, "Mr. Lumi advised that the size 12 and size 13 shoes primarily were made for the US market. These sizes were not commonly sold in Italy, where the average sizes of footwear are smaller." As a man who wears a size 13 shoe, I can verify that it was very difficult to find non-US dress shoe companies who manufactured shoes in size 13 in the 1990s. In the 1990s, I attended Catholic high school in New York. Our uniform required us to wear dress shoes. I'm a somewhat stylish person. I remember being in London in early 1994. During that trip, I was looking for shoes and went to shoe stores and a department store. I'll never forget the stunned looks of the salespersons when I requested size 47. They literally had nothing. The photo on page 439 depicts a last. A last is the model that is used to construct the upper part of a shoe. This photo shows the actual last that was used to construct the upper part of a size 12 Bruno Magli Lorenzo shoe. You'll notice that the last has the number 12 printed on it. During his testimony, Special Agent Bodziak explained to the jurors that next to the printed number 12, someone had used a red Sharpie to write the number 46 on the last. The number 46 denotes the size of the European equivalent to the US size 12 shoe. Bodziak testified that although the last used to make the size 12 shoe had the American size printed on it, all of the lasts for sizes under 46 had the European size printed on it. On pages 445 to 446, Bodziak does indeed write that approximately 20 shoe companies had made shoes with those soles. And with one exception, all of the Lord soles were sold to other Italian shoe manufacturers who used the soles to make and sell shoes exclusively in Italy. The exception was one company in Ireland, however, they also advised that they did not export any shoes with the Silga sole to the US. Keep in mind that these shoes were sold in 1991 and early 1992, which was years before the internet facilitated our current global digital marketplace. Today, any of us can use our phones to order shoes from an obscure manufacturer anywhere on the planet as long as that manufacturer has a website or sells their shoes on sites like Amazon. The creation of the global digital marketplace and on-demand manufacturing has caused many companies to adapt their offerings to a global customer and not completely focus their offerings to their local or regional customer base. There is one important question that Special Agent Bodziak did not address in his book. Did any of the 20 companies that manufactured shoes with the Silga U2887 soles offer their shoes in sizes 46 or 47? I recently had the opportunity to ask Special Agent Bodziak this question, and he informed me that no Silga soles of that size were ordered by any of those companies. They were only made for the Bruno Magli models that were sent to the United States. The U.S. representative for Silga confirmed that no other shoes were ever sold in the United States with the U2887 soles, except for the Bruno Magli Lion and Lorenzo styles. Hopefully this provides clarity to the misinformation which others have been propagating for years in a highly misleading manner. I have great respect for Special Agent William Bodziak. He is a very thorough investigator. Special Agent Bodziak literally wrote the book on forensic footwear analysis. However, in recent years, multiple government reports have called into question the reliability and accuracy of footwear analysis.
Is it the shoes?
No, Mark.
This story is about how we increasingly solve crimes using forensic evidence. On TV and in real life, forensic science plays an important role in criminal convictions. Prosecutors often complain about a so-called CSI effect, where jurors expect to see forensic evidence in every case. The problem is, not all forensic science is as reliable as we've become accustomed to believe. A report in 2009 by the National Academy of Sciences found that many forensic sciences do not meet the fundamental requirements of science. And a report last year by a Presidential Science Council agreed, saying that expert witnesses have often overstated the value of their evidence, going far beyond what the relevant science can justify. And that's the thing here. It's not that all forensic science is bad, because it's not. But too often, its reliability is dangerously overstated. Those reports suggest there is weak scientific support for some aspects of techniques like blood pattern, footwear, firearm, and bite mark analysis.
A new report by a White House advisory council is urging federal prosecutors and judges to tread cautiously when dealing with forensic evidence when the underlying science has not been proven by testing and research. This is a highly critical report from the country's top science and technology experts. What were their biggest concerns?
I think a lot of people are going to be very surprised to hear that this distinguished panel is calling into question scientific methods that have been used for decades.
What are the most common methods that they're saying we should think twice about, that we all think are without reproach?
So to be clear, we are not talking about single-source DNA or fingerprints. What they're concerned about are some of these comparison methods.
In recent years, the forensic field of shoe print or footwear identification has faced serious criticism. Major United States government reports have called into question the reliability and accuracy of shoe print identification. In 2009, the National Academy of Sciences issued a report titled Strengthening Forensic Science in the United States, A Path Forward. It noted shortcomings in certain classifications of forensic science, notably pattern evidence, which would include shoe print and tire tread evidence. This is evidence that is based on subjective observations. Although forensic examiners have long claimed to be able to match pattern evidence, such as shoe and tire treads, to a source with absolute or scientific certainty, the National Academy of Sciences report determined these claims are bogus, because they have not been validated through statistical research. Experts in impression evidence will argue that they accumulate a sense of those probabilities through experience, which may be true. However, it is difficult to avoid biases in experience-based judgments, especially in the absence of a feedback mechanism to correct an erroneous judgment. Regarding footwear analysis, matching a shoe tread pattern left at a crime scene to a particular shoe based on randomly acquired characteristics, such as cuts in the shoe's sole, the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology finds that there are no studies that demonstrate this practice is based on actual science. Such conclusions are unsupported by any meaningful evidence or estimates of their accuracy, and thus are not scientifically valid. Science magazine reported that shoe print examiners need to determine the relevance of various aspects of a shoe print, the brand, how it is worn, and if the shoe is damaged. In 2016, Leslie Hammer, a forensic scientist who specializes in footwear and tire track analysis, told Science magazine that an accurate and relevant database of shoe prints would have to keep up with an ever-changing market of brand name and counterfeit products, document distinctive features like wear and damage patterns, and possibly even account for regional variations in shoe frequency. As of 2016, no such database existed, which calls into question the accuracy of crime scene shoe prints identification. Testifying in 1995, prosecutor Hank Goldberg asked witness Special Agent William Bodziak if the FBI database was computerized. Mr. Bodziak responded that the database was only partly computerized and that his search also included a hand search of his own files and magazines. Mr. Bodziak also testified that he contacted international law enforcement agencies that he knew had maintained shoe print databases. Because this is 1994 and 1995, computerized law enforcement footwear databases were in their infancy. Special Agent Bodziak made assumptions about the shoes, which may have unnecessarily limited the scope of the potential sources to Italian and Brazilian companies. The search excluded counterfeiters and knockoffs. Mr. Bodziak testified that all of the shoes of LAPD personnel at the Bundy crime scene were photographed, and that allowed him to clear those officers as potential donors of the bloody shoe prints. However, testifying for the prosecution, Detective Ron Phillips, who was in charge of the Bundy crime scene, calls into question the validity of the process of clearing the officers as potential donors of the bloody shoe prints.
Detective Phillips, with regard to the photographs of the shoes that we saw of the various detectives, were your shoes also photographed?
No.
And were Detective Furman's shoes photographed?
No.
Were Phillips or Van Adder's shoes photographed?
No.
And I believe I asked you this, but did you have the shoe sizes of any of these officers at all?
No, sir.
And these shoes were photographed at West LA Station?
Yes, it was done in an interview room in West LA Station, and most of them were done with the officer wearing the shoe and just putting his foot up onto a table.
Do you have a log indicating what days those shoes were photographed on?
No, as I said, it occurred over several days, 3 or 4 days, because the officers have days off, and there were several officers to do, so I just put a list down in the watch commander's office that when you come to work, come see Detective Phillips.
Is it true that most officers have at least 2 pair of shoes?
I have no idea.
How many? You didn't wear uniforms very much back then, but when you last wore a uniform, did you have more than 2 pairs of department issue shoes?
No, I've only had 1 pair of uniform shoes at a time.
All right, if one of the officers who testified here, for instance, Risky, indicated he had 2 pairs of shoes, was there any memo ever given to the officers to take a picture of the shoes you were wearing on June 12th or June 13th?
I asked every officer that came up if they had the shoes on that they wore on June 12th to June 13th. And I believe every one of them had the same shoes on.
But these officers had continued, as far as you know, had continued to wear these shoes for whatever period of time before they took the photographs which we saw. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
In other words, they weren't all taken the same day. Some were taken within a week. Is that correct?
Over a period of 3, 4 days, 5 days, maybe even.
What about the shoes?
No, Mark.
Money's gotta be the shoes.
Now, copy this. Trouble afoot for OJ's defense.
And now that a second set of photos show OJ in those Bruno Magli shoes, I don't know what the defense is going to do to explain that away.
Hard copy's got the pictures that could become the soul of the case against him. Now, is a Simpson conviction a shoe-in?
Hello, I'm Terry Murphy.
And I'm Barry Nolan, and this is Hard Copy for Monday, January 6th.
Here are new photos shown to the jury today that made a plaintiff's attorney put his foot down about charges of fakery. The shots of OJ in Bruno Magli's shoes come from a different photographer, not Harry Skull, whose very similar picture the defense labeled a fraud. Experts say the bloody shoe prints outside Nicole's condo were made by Bruno Magli's, but O.J. Simpson has denied wearing that rare brand, despite what the pictures appear to show. The new pictures were submitted just before New Year's from the files of Buffalo freelancer E.J. Flammer. One was published in a 1993 Bills football magazine. Simpson's attorneys objected to the jury seeing the pictures. Quote, "It's highly suspicious that the photos have surfaced at this time."
The Buffalo Trio are three Buffalo, New York-based photographers who were responsible for the photographs of Mr. Simpson allegedly taken on September 26, 1993, prior to the Buffalo Bills-Miami Dolphins game. The gentleman in the middle is Pat McElroy. McElroy did not take any of the photos of Mr. Simpson. Rather, he served as the agent for both Harry Skull Jr. and E.J. Flammer. Despite the fact that he had never served as anyone's agent, in April 1996, Harry Skull Jr. agreed to allow Pat McElroy to be his agent. Shortly after becoming Skull's agent, Pat McElroy sold Skull's photo of Mr. Simpson wearing the so-called murder shoes to the National Enquirer for almost $20,000. However, unbeknownst to Harry Skull, Pat McElroy kept $17,000 and only gave Skull $2,500. More on that in a second. When E.J. Flammer found his photos of Mr. Simpson in late December 1996, he too agreed to allow Pat McElroy to be his agent. Again, a curious choice, to say the least. By the way, despite the financial windfall he earned from selling the Flammer and Skull photos, to our knowledge, McElroy has not served as an agent for anyone since. In July 1996, Harry Skull Jr. testified that he was employed as a black and white printer, photographer, and photo assistant at Phototech Studios. Currently, the homepage of the Buffalo Company's website states, "We have a complete understanding of manipulating image." In early 1996, Skull realized that he had a photo of Mr. Simpson walking across the end zone of Rich Stadium wearing shoes that resembled the Bruno Magli Lorenzos. 20 years after testifying under oath, Harry Skull Jr. shared the story of what really happened in a June 2016 article he wrote for the Buffalo News. Most significant is Skull's revelation that he had nothing to do with the photo ending up in the National Enquirer. Harry Skull writes, "After the criminal trial, a friend asked if he could look at my images further. All of a sudden, my pictures showed up in the National Enquirer. A photographer acted unprofessionally and sold the stuff to the Enquirer without my knowledge, lied to me about the amount of money that was made on the photo, and put me in a bad light when I had to sit in a deposition in Buffalo and defend the authenticity of that image." Very interesting, to say the least. The final member of the trio is E.J. Flammer. In 1993, Flammer's father was the president of the Buffalo Bills Booster Club, and E.J. served as the photo editor for the club's newsletter. E.J. Flammer followed Mr. Simpson's 1995 criminal trial, and he was a friend or acquaintance of Harry Skull Jr. Harry Skull's photograph of Mr. Simpson attained significant news coverage in Buffalo throughout 1996, from April through December. The date and location of the Skull photo was well known. It was the same game that E.J. Flammer had taken photos of Mr. Simpson for the Buffalo Bills Booster Club newsletter. Testifying in 1997, E.J. Flammer claimed that he was completely unaware of all of those things. He testified under oath that it was just by happenstance that he discovered his 30 photos of Mr. Simpson on December 27, 1996. Let's further explore E.J. Flammer's testimony.
He does these impersonations. I swear you would think it was the real people.
Can you tell me when the next time you had occasion to look at those negatives? The negatives were looked at December 27th, 1996. And after you looked at those negatives, did you have occasion to have prints made from them? The prints that were made were for my agent, yes. And when were those prints made? Those were made Monday the 30th. I believe it would have been the 30th of December. Now, was December 30th of 1996 the first time you generated prints from all 30 of those negatives? Yes. And do you recall meeting with me on the afternoon of December 30th, 1996? Mr. Flammer, on December 30th, did you provide me with some prints that had been generated from those 30 negatives? Yes. Now, in addition to the prints you provided me on December 30th, did you take any steps to market or sell these 30 prints? Yes. I had hired an agent and spoken to a lawyer who happens to be a family friend and is my cousin's husband. Now let's hear Bob Baker's cross-examination of E.J. Flammer. And it is your testimony that these photos never came to mind from September of 1993 after the criminal trial started, in June of, strike that, in September of 1994, throughout the whole time period until December 28th, 1996, right? That's correct. And Rob McElroy, he's a freelance photographer around Buffalo, isn't he? That is correct. And his main job is not an agent. His main job is a freelance photographer. Right. And this is what you have on the back of every picture. A copyrighted photograph, not to be videotaped, photographed, photocopied, or otherwise reproduced in any way, analog or digital, and cannot be used by any person, organization, or media without the permission of the photographer or his agent. Right? Yes. More at 11, huh? In any event, the agent is Rob McElroy, correct? Correct. He just happens to be, at a happenstance, the very same agent of Harris Gold Jr., right? Correct. Just happenstance. And his main job isn't an agent at all, is it? No. Now you told this jury that you discovered these photos on the 27th, right? That's correct. Friday, December 27th, you told them that, under penalty of perjury. Right. You told this court, by way of declaration, that you discovered the photos under penalty of perjury on the weekend of the 28th or 29th, right? Let me show it to you. Okay. This is from the official court file filed on this case. That is your signature. That's correct. That was prepared, of course, by Mr. Kelly for you to sign. I believe so. And now, so you said there, the 28th, 29th, under penalty of perjury. You told this jury the 27th. Friday being part of that weekend, I would consider it. Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury if you have December 27th anywhere on that declaration, sir. No, it's not. Now, Skull's depot was taken in Buffalo on July 1st, 1996. You're aware of that? If you say. So even when you heard about Skull getting paid for it, you have nothing. Nothing triggers your mind about this momentous event where your father was in the photograph and they were celebrating 20 years after O.J. Simpson had rushed for 2,000 yards, right? Not particularly. Nothing. And it just so happened that on December 27th, 28th, or 29th, you miraculously go, oh my God, there's 30 photographs of O.J. Simpson with shoes, right? Yes! Now that was Flammer's testimony under oath. However, over the years, the story's changed quite dramatically. There are two other versions of this story, one told by John Q. Kelly, the Brown family attorney, and the other told by Flammer himself. Let's listen to these different versions, and while you're watching, ask yourself, if the testimony was true, then why are there two other versions that are dramatically different than the testimony?
It was stunning that nobody had ever been up to the Buffalo Bills organization to look for photos of Simpson. Just sort of on a lark, I decided to pursue it further. I caught the first flight up to Buffalo. I walked right in, asked to speak to Dennis Lynch.
Are there any photos of O.J. Simpson? And I said, well, it's surprising to me that they didn't discover this earlier, that there was a photograph that was published in 10,000 copies of a newspaper. Well, when he looked at the photo, I think he realized that there was something there.
During the time I took the photographs, I was the photo editor for the Buffalo Bills report. The main purpose of the photos that I took were for a celebratory dinner that they were going to have for the year that O.J. broke the single-season rushing record. Many, many years later, they were sitting in a box in the basement of my parents' house. I received a call from Denny Lynch from the Bills at the time. And he said that, John Kelly, who was Nicole Simpson's family's attorney, was in Buffalo looking for anything he could find.
EJ actually developed the photographs from the negatives right there in his studio, and I just sort of watched these photos being produced. It started out early that day, ended late that night.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you came to find out about these 30 new photos after the Harry Skull photo had already been introduced at trial, and how you happened to go to Buffalo around Christmas in 1996?
Right after Christmas in 96, I had gotten a call from Mike O'Connor, who was Harry Skull's attorney, and he related to me that Harry had seen additional photos taken of Simpson on the same day his one photo of Simpson had been taken. He also indicated that the pictures or photos Fleischman had did not show Simpson in the shoes, but clearly indicated that one or more photographers, in addition to Skull, had been taking photos there that same day. So if we looked, we might find photos of Simpson in the shoes. So based on that, a couple days later, I flew up to Buffalo, went directly to the home of Jerry Fleischman, who had been a former Booster Club president of the Bills. And sure enough, down in his basement office, he had photos of Simpson that were taken the same day, but did not show Simpson in the shoes. Fleischman directed me to Denny Lynch, who was a director of public relations with the Bills, stating that Lynch may be able to direct me to what other photographers had been there that day. We then headed up to the Bills practice facility, went into Denny Lynch's office. He pulled out a banker's box of photographs, included a number of black and white photos of Simpson that had been taken the same day. He indicated that this kid, E.J. Flammer, had taken that photo and many others that day. We then drove to E.J. Flammer's parents' house. E.J. wasn't there. E.J.'s dad was sort of stuck in the middle trying to negotiate a discussion between myself and E.J., who at that time then knew he had photographs of Simpson in the shoes and that they were of considerable value. Finally, E.J. took my call from his parents' house, asked me to meet him at his agent's house, Rob McAvoy's house. We talked there a little bit, and then we all headed back to E.J.'s parents' house again, where E.J. had a photography studio in the basement. E.J., sure enough, had I think it was about 30 negatives of Simpson that had been taken that same fall day in 1993, where you could clearly see in color that Simpson was wearing those Bruno Magli shoes and could actually see the pattern of the bottom of the sole on the shoes even, because he'd been captured walking across the field. EJ developed some of them right in front of me. There's no question then that we had about 30 photographs of Simpson wearing the exact Bruno Magli shoes.
It's certainly strange how dramatically the basic elements of both Flammer and Kelly's stories have changed. As you look at the Skull and Flammer photos, pay attention to the clothing people are wearing both on the field and in the stands. Skull and Flammer were friends. Both men were connected to freelance photographer Rob McElroy and the Buffalo Bills. The Skull photograph attained significant local and national television coverage and newspaper coverage beginning in late April, when the National Enquirer first published the Skull photo, and continued throughout the year. Flammer testified that he did not know about the Skull photo prior to December 27, 1996. This claim doesn't pass the laugh test. The truth usually doesn't include as many significant revisions and white lies as Flammer's story. As we watch the open to the NBC broadcast of the September 26, 1993 Bills-Dolphins game, listen closely to Dick Enberg's comments and pay attention to what people are wearing in the crowd.
What about the shoes?
No, boss.
Money's gotta be the shoes.
On a wild weather day in western New York, it's Rich Stadium the scene as the Miami Dolphins, the rivals from the south, meet the Buffalo Bills, a key AFC Eastern early season game. The weather could be a factor. It has rained all night, rained this morning. It started to rain again now, Paul McGuire, and we expect winds up to 60 miles an hour here in the first half. And with that as a prelude, buckle down, here we go. It's very important for Miami.
Let's go to O.J. Simpson. Well, it was a bad first half for the Bills, but there is some good news. I watched the last minute and a half of the first half with Andre Reed. He had his pads off. He said he was going to be all right. He said it's going to take more than this to keep me out of the game. I walked up the tunnel with Thurman Thomas. He said he had to retape his ankle. It bothered him. He had alluded to something that you said, Paul, that they were beating them up front. The Dolphins were beating them off the ball, but Jim Kelly had to mix up the calls, something that he started to do at the end of the first half. In the second half, they'll mix up the calls, hopefully so that the Dolphins won't beat them off the ball offensively. Dick? All right, thanks, Juice.
It's the shoes in, right?
Nah.
Ooh,
snow. That can't be good for suede, can it?
I wouldn't think so.
What should I do?
Why don't you turn it inside out?
Inside out, right.
Wait a minute. What the hell do you call this?
I turned my jacket inside out.
Well, you look like a damn fool.
Well, it's a new suede jacket. It might get ruined.
You're not walking down the street with me and my daughter dressed like that. That's for damn sure.
What, are you going out?
Yeah.
Where's your new jacket?
What?
Oh, what'd you do to it?
I was out in the snow last night.
But you know what that does to suede?
I have an idea.
It's the shoes in, right?
Nah.
For more, visit ojsimpson.co.